Swiss bank secrecy under pressure as the US hunts down tax evaders. Just how will Switzerland defend its traditional confidentiality? And will this threaten the very existence of tax havens? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. The United States is investigating whether billions of dollars in evaded taxes are being hidden in Switzerland's largest bank. Authorities want UBS to reveal the names of American customers who investigators believe may be in violation of tax laws at home. Now, Switzerland is considered a tax haven by many of the world's wealthiest people. Its banking system's confidentiality has made it a popular choice for the rich to keep their money safe. But the US says its brand of banking secrecy has also made Switzerland ideal for those who want to evade tax payments. The US government has accused UBS of tax fraud, saying it helped its US clients hide assets from US tax authorities. The charges were dropped last week when the bank agreed to pay a $780 million fine and disclose the names of some of its customers. But the US is now asking for the identities of the holders of 52,000 UBS accounts. The bank has been given until July to decide whether or not to reveal the information. Well, UBS has been criticised for handing over the names of 300 of its clients, but the Swiss president has been quick to support the bank's actions.
Bank secrecy still remains in place. It protects private spheres, but it does not protect tax fraud. Such an indictment could have put UBS under huge additional pressure in the US and worldwide. It's common that when banks are under such indictments, institutional investors reconsider or even withdraw their positions, which would have endangered UBS's very existence. And this danger would have had consequences on the Swiss economy.
All right, joining us today are our guests in Toronto, Jack Blum, a defence attorney specialising in offshore tax evasion. In Geneva, Murat Zaki, journalist at Le Temps newspaper and author of Inside the UBS Scandal. And in Zurich, Peter Kunz, professor for business law at the University of Bern University. Welcome to all of you. Good to have you on the programme. Peter Kunz, if we could start with you. Where authorities of one country suspect tax evasion, shouldn't tax havens like Switzerland simply cooperate and just permit investigation? Nothing to hide, nothing to fear.
Well, actually, Switzerland has nothing to hide, that's for sure. But we have a tradition and a clear distinction between tax fraud on one side and tax evasion on the other side. This distinction is a legal distinction upheld for many years, for many decades. And, you know, it's easy to just finger-pointing against Switzerland, for instance, not only by the United States of America, but also by the European Union. But please keep in mind that, for instance, other countries in the European Union, let's point out Luxembourg, Belgium or Austria, have provisions very similar to the ones in Switzerland. So in my view, it's not quite clear that Switzerland is really some sort of an illegal tax haven. It's just a good haven for people bringing money abroad.
Jack Blum, it's possible many of the bank's clients may be evading tax at UBS, but does that give reason for the US just to bowl in and break apart a centuries-old tradition of confidentiality?
It isn't like the US is bowling in. It was UBS that bowled in. You have to understand what happened here, and it wasn't that the clients came to UBS in Switzerland and opened an account. UBS had a sales force that came to the United States, and they sold the ability to not report on their American tax returns as a way of getting Americans to put their money in UBS. They came to the United States with encrypted computers. They lied on their immigration forms to say they were there for pleasure, not for business. They created a whole system of subterfuge to allow people to bring their money to Switzerland and not report it on US tax returns. It turns out, of course, that this is a felony in the United States. It's a crime for individuals to assist other individuals in impeding the collection of tax. This all happened in the United States. 2 officials of UBS have now been indicted for that behavior, And the bank itself, which has, I want to tell you, close to 30,000 employees in the United States, was on the verge of being indicted as well.
Okay, let me bring in Mirat Zaki. Forgive me for interrupting. Let me bring in Mirat Zaki there. How dangerous would you say all this is for Switzerland if it goes the way it looks like it's going?
I think what is really dangerous is the scandal part of it, because it is not so spectacular what UBS did. UBS played with the gray zones that were in the qualified intermediary agreement, this agreement between Switzerland and the US, in which it was allowed to create foundations for US persons and hide their identities behind these foundations. They were not supposed to divulge the names of clients who had foundations. They were only supposed to give their names in case it was simple accounts. So the UBS played with this gray area very much, and indeed, as Professor Boulum said, they violated US laws. So the scandal part of it makes the whole Swiss financial center become exposed and vulnerable. But I want to say that in the wars between financial centers, there is also, of course, the US, New York and Miami, and the Caribbean offshore centers. And there are all the offshore centers of the UK, which are very active, which have the next most important market shares in tax evasion worldwide after Switzerland. You have Switzerland, then you have London, and then you have the US as the most aggressive tax evasion promoters worldwide.
Okay, I just want to bring in Peter Kunze. I can see that you're anxious to break in. UBS actively violated US laws.
Well, actually, just let me point out at the beginning that I'm not a speaker of UBS or a speaker of the Swiss government. I'm a law school professor and just observing the situation. But I'm very critical concerning the behavior of the Swiss authorities in this whole thing. And I'm also very critical about the behavior by US-American authorities, and I will explain you why. There was a court proceeding going on. The Department of Justice, the American Department of Justice, filed a suit to get the information. So the American authorities knew exactly that it would take some time in the court of law to decide whether or not tax fraud is given or not. So check when you say there is tax fraud involved. We don't know it yet because the court proceedings were going on. So the only thing that the American legal system should have done is to wait another 2 or 3 weeks so that the Swiss court would have provided the data to the foreign authorities. What happened here?
Let's throw that back to Jack Blum. It's fair to say that UBS argue that Swiss law strictly prohibits UBS employees from disclosing account information based in Switzerland. The US government's petition simply ignores the existence of Swiss law and sovereignty, doesn't it?
Of course, because all of this happened in the United States. It's one thing to say if somebody comes to Switzerland, Swiss law can protect what happens in Switzerland. But all of this happened in the United States. The Swiss were actively involved in the United States in the concealment. And that's the information that's requested. Now I'm going to point something else out. UBS is a ward of the Swiss government. It's taken something like $50 billion or more to keep it alive. And guess who helped do that? It was the US Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve gave the Swiss Central Bank swap lines that permitted UBS to survive. Now, what kind of system is it that says you can come into our country, you can encourage our wealthiest citizens not to pay tax, you can take it back to Switzerland, and then, by God, you come to us and ask to have your bank bailed out? It's a preposterous situation.
Let's put that to Peter Kunze. What do you have to say to that? And briefly, if you will, because I want to bring in Mirat Zaki again.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, the whole financial crisis is not a UBS problem. UBS is one of many banks. You know as well as me, Jack, that, for instance, Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan, and many American banks have problems as big as UBS banks. So this is definitely not a Swiss bank problem. What now has changed is that for whatever reasons, I leave it open with that, for whatever reason, foreign countries try to put on pressure Switzerland for maybe not legal reasons, but mostly for financial reasons. And this has nothing to do with legal advance or with a judicial system. This is more or less political.
Mirazaki, the fact that UBS have disclosed some names indicates that they may be prepared to play ball, and perhaps that they do have something to worry about.
Yeah, of course. They even admit that they have had unacceptable conduct in the US, UBS and the authority that regulates banks here. But the point is, I will contradict Mr. Bloom on 2 points. It's not because it happened in the US that the US is authorized to violate, like they did, Swiss laws with the consent of Switzerland. The accounts were based in Switzerland, so it's Swiss laws here that have to be respected. And of course, they should have waited the 3 more weeks that they should have before the court here, the Federal Administrative Court, had given its decision whether it was a case of fraud or evasion. If it was evasion, it wouldn't have justified lowering banking secrecy. Second misinformation that Mr. Bloom said, he said that it is the US who helped UBS with its financial crisis, but it was only extending a lending to the Swiss Central Bank in order that the Swiss Central Bank takes over 40 billion francs of toxic assets from UBS. So it is, of course, Switzerland that helped UBS out of its problem with its toxic assets that were on its balance sheet.
Okay, let's put that to Mr. Bloom very, very, very briefly. We want to take a break, but just 30 seconds, if you will.
Look, I won't quarrel with anything except the proposition that the U.S. government violated the law. It was UBS that turned the names over, and UBS did it for very good reason. They were facing criminal indictment, and they should have turned over a lot more names.
Okay, well, we're going to take that short break now, and when we come back, should Switzerland rethink its banking secrecy laws? Plenty to discuss. Stay with Inside Story.